Hi, it's Sarah again, and today I would like to talk to you a little bit about depression and suicide ideation and things that I've dealt with and have found useful in my own experiences. And well, let's see. First, I think I should start out by saying I've had depression since, well, for a really long time. And uh, I guess I would accompany that with uh, anxiety. I've had a lot of anxiety in my life. So um, I think that that's a good place to start by maybe addressing that I'm not too sure that I've ever encountered anyone with depression that hasn't also had a healthy side of anxiety. Um, I think these two things perpetuate each other. You get depressed because you're anxious about uh, yourself and how others see you and how you perceive yourself and how you perceive your situation and will this work out and maybe I'm not good enough and all these different anxieties build into sort of what I would call uh, like a dome of depression to protect you almost. Like the depression becomes the armor to help you cope with your anxieties. So you retreat into yourself more to deal with all of these anxieties. And I really would be interested to hear from anybody that thinks that they have depression without anxiety, that there's no worry, there's no um, external confusion or concern or worry or nagging thoughts or intrusive thoughts about being good enough or about being able to cope or how hopeless the situation is. These are anxieties. And I think that depression is the result of long term anxiety and it's a coping mechanism for anxiety. I am not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. But just from my own personal experiences in counseling and my own personal experiences just in daily meditation, I find that one of the best ways to uh, approach depression is through a lens of long term anxiety. I again, whether your depression is permanent or just a temporary situation that you've stumbled into that you can recover from. I really believe that what got you to this point probably has to do with a lot of intrusive thinking and a lot of uh, just judgments in your head that have to do with intrusive thoughts and anxieties. And I think that learning to cope with anxiety is a huge step towards helping you handle and manage depression. I'm not offering a cure here, just some food for thought, some friendly food for thought from one depressed person to another, maybe. Or if you're a counselor out there listening to this, perchance, uh, I can't stress enough that depression and suicide ideation are coping mechanisms for anxiety because these things bring comfort to the depressed mind. Depression, if you consider what depression is doing, it depresses everything. It depresses your dopamine. So you don't feel joy. You don't get the same excitement you used to about things. You feel like pieces of you fall away. You're like you're losing yourself piece by piece. First, it becomes this depression, this overwhelming depression, maybe even of just loss and maybe even loss after loss or failure after failure. And it becomes this anxiety of that happening again and this hopelessness of being able to prevent it. Um, so those are some food for thought. Okay, so I don't want to claim that I know these things for a fact. It's just based on my own experiences alone and with other people. I, again, I would be hard pressed to recall any time I've met somebody that was just straight up depressed without any anxieties. Now, sometimes depression is a really normal reaction to something like death of a lost one, or sorry, death of a loved one, or a loss of a loved one, or uh, an illness. Something. Sometimes depression is just a natural reaction to these things, and it's temporary, like part of a grieving process. It's just a step you take towards healing. You must go through this depression phase, and that can be really normal. However, there are times for some of us where that never stops. It just continues. It doesn't go away. It's not this temporary problem like people say, like suicide is this um, permanent solution to a temporary problem. I don't see it that way at all. For me, depression is a lifelong thing. It's coupled with my anxieties, and it has served to actually help me survive. Uh, Through trauma, I find myself routinely returning to this very comforting thought that at any point I could end it. Is it that bad yet? And the answer, thankfully, is no so far. Generally speaking, I'm leaving a lot out. I'm not trying to make light of suicide ideation at all. I've been hospitalized for suicide ideation in the past. So this is not to make light of it or make it seem simple. I have been on a antidepressant medication for years, and it helps. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I've temporarily asked for them to increase my dose of antidepressant because I knew that was going to be an uphill thing as I was learning about my condition and getting the diagnosis and learning about stages and grades of cancer. And first they were going to use this treatment, but then they realized it was stage 4, so they completely ditched that treatment and went into this other. And I thought, I can't do. I need something. Uh, but interestingly enough, there was a period during my initial diagnosis of cancer where it almost cured my depression. I want to say, if you've ever had depression, I highly recommend getting cancer. But no, no, don't do that on purpose. I mean, like, don't start smoking or anything. Uh, the reason I say that is because when I actually went after my first meeting with a doctor about cancer, I drove home smiling. I was like, what the hell am I doing curing, trying to cure this? Because in the beginning, they thought they were going to cure my cancer. I thought, do I really want to do that? Later on, they found out it was stage 4, so they couldn't cure it. But in the beginning stages, I found myself just be like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I even here? I'm depressed. This is like a godsend. Um, Later on, we all have survival instincts. I don't think that there's a hypocrisy here. I think that depression was serving as a defense mechanism for so long, and faced with an actual illness, not a death, but an illness. Because once you get past the initial thing of having cancer diagnosis of, I'm dying right now. Well, cancer these days isn't really like that. They have lots of treatments and other alternatives, and people live with cancer for many years these days. So it's if you're thinking of committing suicide by cancer, that's a really oftentimes very slow and agonizing death. Most people who want to commit suicide aren't looking for any more slow and agonizing in their life. They're looking to end that kind of thing. So after a while of thinking it, like, why are you smiling? What's this so fun? This is not killing you. This isn't, if it's killing you, it's doing it very slowly. Um, so yeah, no, if you wait until cancer hurts, you've waited beyond treatment. You know, I should say, not treatment, you've waited beyond a cure. If you wait until cancer hurts, typically speaking, cancer doesn't hurt for a really long time. So I waited until it was just this little tiny pain I could ignore, and it would come and go and come and go, and it started to be there more often than not. But it was really easy to ignore, not something I would normally think of going to a doctor to treat. Um, as someone who was depressed, I was willing to ignore that for a really long time, thinking in the back of my head, I bet it's cancer or something. Ha ha ha. You know, how self-destructive is that? That's like self-sabotage, right? So I self-sabotaged myself into like stage 4 cancer. So how's that for depression and anxiety being a mental illness? Yeah? Okay, so I have my own experiences with this disease. I, I speak from a point of experience, not necessarily education. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's where I'm coming from. So moving on from there, I feel that suicide ideation being a coping mechanism, when you take suicide ideation from mere ideation to an actual plan. See, for me, the plan was almost a hobby, was perfecting the plan. Um, and anytime I felt stressed, there was a great relief I had in just retreating to this place, this very isolated, secretive place in my mind that nobody else really knew about, where then I would just plan my exit. um, and it gave me great relief to think of that, just this nothingness that I was going to retreat into. Um, and usually what stayed me from doing anything was guilt, but also survival. I don't think the survival instinct completely ever went away. In fact, I remember consciously practicing in my mind to try not to have the survival skills or survival instinct. Um, that was part of the getting ready for my plan, which I don't feel comfortable mentioning what my plan was here. That's not what this video is about. I don't want to sink this video into becoming the suicide ideation itself. No, because I'm glad I didn't in some ways. So let's basically, I think what ends up happening to a lot of people who are depressed, speaking from my own personal experiences, what I think I was going through was sort of in a way a kind of euthanasia. I was seeking to end this undignified terminal illness of just, I mean, I had no emotional control. I felt like before I was medicated, especially, I felt like I was dying of wanting to be better, if that makes any sense. I felt like I had a terminal case of wanting to be better and not knowing how to enact that, not knowing how to act, not having the motivation to act upon those things. And also with a really dampened dopamine up, you know, I guess. You don't experience joy or reward for anything good or fun. Um, Everything kind of falls away, like just to this mediocre, dull. Well, it's depression. It depresses everything. It depresses your sensations. I remember after being on my medication for a few weeks, I started noticing color. I was like, how did I not notice that I wasn't really even seeing color? Everything was brighter, literally brighter. Depression depresses everything, including, I think, my vision, my sense of taste. It depressed everything. I mean, your senses are the way for you to take in the world, to experience the world. And if all of your senses are being depressed, that's how you're taking in the world. The whole world becomes depressed to you. Um, it's just gray, this overcoating of gray, and you can't really get a full view of anything if you can't see its colors. So, or at least our perception of what colors should be. If all you're hearing in music is just annoying noise, that's depression. That's your hearing that's been depressed. You're not taking in sound even the same way. If you're depressed and you're not enjoying food the way you used to, that's your taste being depressed, your sense of smell and taste that's being diminished by a disease. Think about that. When you think about, I don't want to take medication for depression, that just means I'm weak. No, do you say that to like a diabetic that needs insulin? If you're depressed, everything, all of your thoughts, the whole world, everything you see, taste, touch, feel, think is depressed. That's something you should think about. That's something everyone should think about, whether they're depressed or not. Anyone that's ever known a depressed person should stop to consider what that condition means, what that word means, depressed. It's literally stunting everything. It's cutting you off from the world. And that's a good reason to get help and to seek solutions. Or at least, if you can't cure it, at least to treat it, right? Like cancer. So, anyway, I think that suicide is a very personal choice. But I think that suicide ideation comes from anxiety over pain and trauma, and that what you're looking for is a relief and a release. And whatever that pain is, it's no different than someone with cancer who says, I want to die with dignity. I would choose euthanasia. And that's how I see suicide. Um, that doesn't mean I approve it. That doesn't mean I like it. It just means I get it. I understand it. I get where they're coming from. I get where people, I have this weird fascination sometimes when I hear of someone who's committed suicide. I find it almost like important to know how they did it. I don't know why. I'm not sure why that is, but and rarely does it ever affect my plan. But I'm always very curious to know other people's plans because I don't know, there's something, it makes me wonder if that's something that helps them live longer. Is that plan, knowing that there's a way out. I think if it weren't for suicide ideation, I would have gone mad in my lifetime. I just don't think I would be the same person I am today if I wasn't able to at least look at the door and go, there's a way out. There's always that exit, like if it ever gets that bad. And there's a certain actual philosophy in Stoicism, right? Stoicism kind of takes that into consideration. Um, how to remain kind of keep calm and carry on, that sort of attitude, how not to get hysterical with life. I guess just go, I'm crazy. Life is too much. Part of the way that you keep yourself calm is in Stoicism recognizing there's the door. If this is too much, you can always just leave. And okay, no, I can keep going. I'm good. I'm good. So in some philosophies, suicide is sort of used as, or I guess suicide ideation is used as a measurement of one's pain almost. It's a way to keep yourself sane, but it's a way to, well, there you can quit the game. You don't have to stay and play, but recognize you're done. Then you're done. You get no more input. Well, then suicide's a pretty daunting task. So that's not an act of cowardice, that is an act of overcoming one's entire system of self-preservation. And I can't think of something that's more of a disease than something that eats away your self-preservation. Um, that's a pretty major thing to lose. And that's a trauma event type of thing. So compassion for where you're at if you've ever been there. Uh, on that brink, I've been there. I get it. It takes a lot to overcome self-preservation because that's built in, that's instinct. That's a part of our brain that isn't meant to be overcome. That's meant to keep you alive. That's meant to happen, even when you're half asleep, to like, if you're falling, put your hands out, catch yourself or whatever, wake up. Self-preservation is always present, and that's a really difficult instinct to overcome. So it's hard sometimes for people to realize that at times suicide ideation is a self-preservation mode, so that talking about it shouldn't be such a taboo. It can actually help a person maybe just get it out of their head and work through it rather than committing to it because you're stuck in your own thoughts and you have nobody else to bounce these ideas off of. And so it just gets more and more detailed and until you realize you're enacting a plan that you don't really want to do. It's not a happy thing. Like if you had cancer, would you go on chemo? I did. I didn't want a slow, painful, excruciating. Yeah, I'm not nihilistic. That's a weird thing for someone with suicide ideation to say. Uh, but I don't believe necessarily that you are either. You might be, but I don't believe that suicide ideation and nihilism are the same thing. So just again, food for thought. So okay, so once we've discussed these kinds of things, I kind of want to talk about self-esteem and self-sabotage because I think these things are built into the anxiety that creates depression. Um, Once you start to fail or start to lose things in life, you might start to think there's a pattern here. And correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation, but you might start to see failures as a thing you do by nature, which is a thing we all do by nature. Uh, you're not special just because you fail. You're not bad or deficient because you're not good at anything. Most people aren't good at anything. Most people have to practice a hell of a lot to get good at anything. Think about that also. I know I say that a lot, but these were mind-blowing thoughts when I had them the first time. So maybe consider that, you're sabotaging yourself with your thoughts. Everybody fails the first time they sit down to play piano. Everybody fails usually for like the first probably like 5 years that they sit down to play piano until they start picking up really getting it kind of lessons, like not just the beginner stuff, but until they get good. They're actually messing up. That's what learning is messing up until you get it. So consider that one of the options is messing up is it's okay. That's how you learn. That's how you get better at something. And that's how it's not a reason to quit anything ever. It's just a reason to continue going on and getting better at something. So if you're failing, even if you're like chronically failing, um, just There it is. Either it's something you're not good at and you can give it up, or it's something you can't give up and you'll get better at, but it takes time. So, anyways, self sabotage and self esteem, I think, are connected because there becomes a point where you start to hate yourself, maybe self loathing, and you can't get away from this person you hate. They're with you all the time. You are annoyed by yourself. Great. Um, so it's really hard to stop self sabotaging because that's a person you already hate and you love to hate this person now. It's become a hobby. You know, your internal dialogue is probably something way meaner than you would say to other people face to face. You talk to yourself probably on the regular and say the meanest things, and catching yourself doing it is sometimes where a solution can be found. If you can catch yourself in the act of doing this self sabotage, you might have a chance of stopping it. And that was a really good benefit of taking the medication for me. It was to slow down the racing, nihilistic, or whatever you want to call it, those suicide ideation thoughts, and start recognizing the self sabotage. I'm not giving myself a chance to succeed because I'm automatically failing. Um, Nothing I do is going to be good enough. So that's just always going to be a fail. So, okay, medication and therapy to help build a better self esteem. That, as opposed to suicide ideation and depression, starts to help calm and soothe the anxiety. See, I've worked through some of these things. So, sometimes through meditation, through medication, through talk therapy, group therapy, different kinds of ways of getting better, through getting to know yourself better, because that's what therapy is. Um, you start to see the self sabotage as self depreciating, low self esteem, bad self, all this self. Oh, depression is very self centered. Let me say that again. I'm not saying selfish. Depression requires all this attention to self. Self. And again, I don't want that to be confused for selfish. Self centered and selfish are two different things. Because a selfish person isn't thinking, I am so bad, I need to get off the planet. A selfish person isn't thinking, I'm so rotten that I need to kill myself. No, no. A self centered person might think that. I'm so bad that I wreck the world. I make everything bad, and I'm bad. And it's so bad that other people are suffering because I'm so bad. They suffer just like I do having to be around me. And they suffer so much being around me. Blah, blah, blah. Ergo, it's actually probably a lot better for the world if I just off myself, right? That's not selfish. That's very self centered, thinking that you can help anything with your suicide. Like, really? I mean, maybe you can logic your way into that, like, oh, I'm a burden on people or whatever. But you're not really at that point trying not to be. You're just sort of giving into that notion. And that's not a lot of self respect. And so this becomes a matter of self respect to kind of climb out of this anxiety, to find reason enough to do it, reason enough to get yourself help, brave enough to talk about these stupid things because they are stupid. You've been alone in your thoughts thinking these things. You've had no one to bounce these ideas around with. So they're not good ideas. They're just ideas you've had by yourself. Um, and most therapists make their living hearing these ideas other people have thought. They're used to dumb ideas. They're used to even good bad ideas. So you're not going to shock your therapist, most likely. You can just tell them what's on your mind, and it's okay. They hear these things on the regular. Just talk. It's all right. Open up to a therapist where it's confidential, so they kind of are trained in how to respond to these things without making you feel worse. But you're not going to shock your therapist, most likely. It's okay. Just talk to them. Tell them about your self-esteem. Tell them your plan. Tell them once you say your plan out loud, it might sound stupid to you because it's been in your head so long, you know? Really work it out with another person because you might find out that that's not what you want to do. You might find out that there's other things you want to do. So, just some thought is that self respect is an earned thing. You don't owe your self respect, you earn your self respect. But you have to let yourself. You have to let yourself try. You have to try to like yourself. You have to do things to impress yourself sometimes. You have to do things that you're afraid to do sometimes to go, damn, I didn't think I could do that. Because that's how you earn your self respect. That's how you get it back. If you've lost your self respect and you think you need to die and your inner dialogue has become cruel, I mean, aggressively cruel, then maybe you owe it to yourself or the people around you to look for ways to improve your self respect. And one of those ways might be getting into counseling or talking to your doctor and getting on a medication that can help you slow these thoughts down and process them better. More logic, right? More common sense. You didn't get here being stupid. Stupid people, I think, might be less depressed because, they can go about the world feeling good about themselves, thinking they're smart and everything. It's the smart people in the world that realize how stupid they are and how inefficient they are and how, ridiculous they're being and whatever. I think, a lot of depressed people, if you talk to them, they're not stupid. They have no self-respect. Guilty. So I'm not judging anybody else. It comes from a really bad self-esteem and really no self-respect because of all this anxiety. You've told yourself that you're hopeless and useless and that the world is better off without you, whatever. And you start making these plans to calm, soothe. There's the door. Um, so yeah, mental illness and anxiety is no joke. That, for a few people it jumps out of nowhere. Ah, I'm anxiety, I'm here to stay. But more often than not, I should say, it's a PTSD situation where you've had a bad experience, or even more fun, the CPTSD, which is like complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which comes from ongoing PTSD. So, like, you get PTSD from that one incident, but then it keeps happening. Complex PTSD is built from periods of calm and quiet that abruptly switch to violent and loud and intense. Um, CPTSD has trained your mind to go from absolute silence, like 0 to 60 kind of thing, absolute silence to maximum violence with no warning. So your senses are always trying to be picking up for that. And you're trying to function in life while you have this hypervigilance for danger. And these two things can cause a lot of anxiety, and then you shell yourself in depression, and now you've got like 3 mental illnesses to deal with right there. Um, so it really helps, I think, parents out there that might be listening, talk to your kids. Talk to your kids. Talk to your kids. Don't wait for them to get depressed. Just tell them this might happen someday. And if you ever feel like, I hate to say it, Hey kid, if you ever feel hopelessly useless, come talk to me. Let's talk that out. If you ever feel like you need a break from life, let's discuss that. Hey kids, if you ever feel like you really want to discuss pain, tolerance, and how to cope with life, those kinds of things. So, yeah, prepare your kids. It could happen, and it can happen at any age. You generally, oftentimes, like puberty or college, just usually like during big life changes. Um, it can happen after the death of a loved one. Depression can happen, and it's often a response to some sort of anxiety-ridden post-traumatic stress response. I don't want to label you with a disorder because I don't know that it's here to stay necessarily, but a post-traumatic stress response. And because animals are generally good at hiding their pain, it's kind of one of those survival skills to sort of keep up with the pack. So anyways, pain can become anxiety can become a great source of secrecy where you suffer in silence. You might be having your panic attacks in complete silence, sometimes so silent you're not even breathing. And that lack of air can make it worse and make you feel like your body is about to leave the planet and you feel like you're dying because you're not getting air. You need to breathe regularly. Or the opposite can happen sometimes. If you have a panic attack, you might start to hyperventilate, which means you're breathing too fast. But a lot of people, including myself, get the kind of panic attack where you shut off all noise. You get really quiet. You get dead quiet because your thoughts are so loud. Your whole body just shuts down, like listening to these thoughts that are super loud and being hyper aware of your entire environment. And you stop breathing and you can't think clearly without air. I don't know if you I don't know if you're informed about this or not, but your brain needs oxygen to think straight. And if you're not breathing right, or if you're getting too much oxygen, you're not thinking straight. So really, when the anxiety starts, or if you know somebody with these issues, when that anxiety starts, if you notice that the breathing isn't regular, get them to breathe with you. Breathing, breathing, regular breathing. Just regular, doesn't have to be super deep breaths, but not shallow. Just regular breathing. Sometimes that's all it takes to end a panic attack. Just breathing. Because you just need to think. Or maybe stop thinking. Whatever the case, your brain needs to regulate, and it can't do it without oxygen. So, a physical response to a physical problem, whether it's lack of oxygen or racing thoughts, those are physical problems because thoughts are chemical reactions in your brain. So, when you think about something or when you're feeling something, just keep in mind that's a chemical cocktail that your brain is sending signals throughout your body, filling your body with those chemicals. And it's making you feel a certain way, whether it's lack of oxygen. Pay attention to what signals are being sent throughout your body. Calm your breathing so that you can regulate those signals and that your heart will stop pounding so hard. you know, it's pounding hard because it's trying to get oxygen to all your body parts, all your organs and your fingers and your toes. Breathe normally. That will help. So, because of this silence that happens and through anxiety, um, a lot of people then end up with this intense secrecy, these thoughts in their heads that they only think, and it's very private, and it becomes so secret that this person might eventually realize that they're exhibiting it on the outside, um, like through their silence or just depression, just not being able to taste fun anymore. And it becomes sort of an act of isolation. to drown out the rest of the world's noise, or whatever the case, to not infect others with your silence, or to not infect others with your diseased mind, or whatever the thought is that's made you feel horrible about yourself. Um, you start to isolate to keep yourself from others. And it's a comfort. It's a comfort. It's a relief. Oh, no more people. They don't have to, nobody, I'm not in anybody's way. I'm not messing up anyone else's day. I'm not making any mistakes, thank God, because there's a lot of embarrassment that goes with anxiety. Everything's quiet and I'm safe and I'm not making any mistakes. And if I do, I'm the only one that knows about it. Really, really say these things out loud. Sometimes that helps. Because these are comforting thoughts and it's a survival mechanism, that isolation. And even dogs that are sick do this. They isolate. They'll leave the pack. They're going into their, it's a depressed dog, but they'll even do this if they're sick. Um, that's a survival instinct too, but it's kind of an more altruistic. It has to do with the survival of the pack, not just yourself. But again, there's this anxiety, depression thing happening. That's this isolation, this ultimate sense of I should not be around other people because I'm not like them, right? Right? You're not like them. You can't relate to them anymore. It's like them versus you. That's an issue. That's a problem. So, anyways, where do we go from isolation and bad self-esteem to happiness and working on yourself? And I find that there are two things that have really helped me out of this. And the first one is gratitude, is sometimes being able to say, like, catch myself in the bad thoughts, like these anxious thoughts of no more people, no more people, this repetitive thought. Just get alone, no more people, just be alone. I hate people sometimes will come out of my mouth. I hate people. And I'll have to stop myself and say, that's not true. There are people I really like and admire. Some of them still alive. Some of them not relegated to history, right? I don't hate people. I don't hate humanity. I hate some things happening in the world. I'm going to be really honest about that. I really despise some things happening in the world today. But I don't hate people. I hate me. Ah, okay. So that was a starting point, oddly enough, towards finding happiness, is not I hate people. Call yourself out on, because depression lies. Depression will tell you terrible things, and it's lying. Call the out on these lies. Call your brain out. That's a lie. I don't hate people. I hate me. Oh, I'm starting to see people through the lens of me. I'm starting to see the world, like world events or whatever, through the lens of that's everybody. No, a few people fuck it up for everybody else. Just that's life. A few people manage to screw it up for a lot of people. Think of like that school shooting in like Texas. That was one guy that wrecked the whole world for that day. And for some people for the rest of their lives. That was one guy. That's not the world. That's not humanity. That's not us. So, lighten up a little. It, it's a tragedy when it happens. But you cannot blame humanity for those acts. Um, the war bordering on genocide in Ukraine right now, that is one man and his small group of cohorts encouraging him, probably. That is not humanity. Humanity are all the people gathered in Ukraine that aren't even Ukrainian trying to help, right? All the people in Poland, for example, trying to get like all the animals to get their health care and shelters and stuff like that. That's humanity. These are groups of people trying to work towards saving little kids that had to evacuate their cancer hospital or whatever. That's the humanity. We stop and look at the inhumanity that one person does and stop seeing like the outpouring of just the outreach of love to Texas right now. Like the people that are rushing to Texas just to, free counseling, whatever they can give, whatever skill they have, whether it's sending these people money for gas or childcare for their younger kids or whatever. That's the humanity. So the shooter was a guy, a lone person who had really messed up brains and didn't have the resources or whatever it was that might have stopped that wasn't available. Okay, but that's not humanity. So don't don't sell yourself short there. Some gratitude, because depression lies, depression covers up the truth, and depression conceals the good. That's You got to call it out. So that's the first thing is gratitude. And the second thing that I found that really helps against depression and anxiety is curiosity. Curiosity. When I'm learning something, when I'm actively pursuing something new that I've never done before, didn't know before, um, when I learn about a new animal that was just discovered, no matter how small, that's fascinating to me. Whatever it is for you, whether it's fixing cars or art or learning to skydive or even just reading a new article. Learning something new, curiosity, being curious is the opposite of depressed. Depressed brains can't function when they're engaged in something interesting. When curiosity is engaged, it shuts down depression. Suddenly your self-esteem is improved. You're learning something. Suddenly your anxiety is over. Maybe your anxiety picks up a little because you're learning something new. It might not be good things. You might be learning about climate change. You might be learning about the polar bear situation in the Arctic. Or wait, yeah. Uh, you might, yeah, it's the Arctic. I was thinking Antarctic, Arctic. Uh, you might be struggling to learn about cancer for the first time. Right? Right? So you might not even be learning something good, but being curious about it and wanting to learn more, that means you need to wake up tomorrow to read that next chapter or watch that next documentary or attend that next class. That's something to look forward to. And anything to look forward to is the opposite of suicide ideation. Anything here on planet Earth or the space around it, anything in the physical world that keeps you engaged and learning and wanting to know more, or even in the spiritual world that keeps you engaged in learning and wanting to know more, that curiosity is tied to self-preservation. It's maybe even the reason why we have self-preservation is so that we can continue to learn these new things. So that's some food for thought. Those are ways to build self-esteem. Gratitude and seeing the world through different eyes, and curiosity and seeing the world through those eyes. Those are the two ways that I've found that are drug-free if you want to actively start doing something to constructively combat depression. However, these are not replacements for therapy. And I mean drug therapy. I mean there's even ketamine therapy now. Like if you don't want ongoing medicine that you take every day, there's ketamine that can work for, like they say, like results for sometimes up to a year, sometimes more, where you just have like the 6-week program or whatever it is. And then you just go in from time to time for like if you need a boost, you know? Ketamine used to be a party drug. And really, it started out as an animal anesthesia for surgery for veterinarians. And now it is being used therapeutically to treat depression, even for like end of life people, like with terminal illnesses and stuff like that. I called and checked into it. It's generally done for untreatable depression. So if you find that you have depression that's treatment resistant, it's more up your alley. Also, another reason they didn't want to take me is because they really haven't tested it on people who are on chemotherapy. And I've been on chemotherapy for a little over 2 years now. So they weren't very comfortable with that at this time until there's more studies done on that. So, there you go. um, that's what I know about depression and different things that can help. I'm helped with Cymbalta. Um, I take a fairly low dose that I find is pretty therapeutic. Like I said, when I was first getting diagnosed with cancer, my doctor was pretty open about just increasing my dose 30 milligrams, and that seemed to help a lot when I was dealing with just figuring out what until they had a treatment plan and everything. Cancer is pretty scary, and fear and anxiety and so yeah. um, but I felt the need to make this video because there's been an uptick in suicides, especially young suicide, and I wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents out there into the universe, even though this is going on almost an hour now. So, for what it's worth, these are my feelings about the situation. The medications that I've mentioned, this is not a sponsored video of any kind. This is just my own experiences. And with that, I guess I'll end things. If you have any questions or thoughts, please leave them in the comments below as respectfully as you can. Or at least, just please try not to be disrespectful, I guess. And then please, please be kind to yourself and others. Give yourself what you need as far as goodness in life. Taste good food, surround yourself with good friends, and care for yourself. And that's the way we make the world a better place. All right, so you have a great day. Thanks for listening. Bye.